About counterfeiting?
Yeah, let's talk about counterfeiting. Here, let's bring up the next photograph here. Good old Marlboro cigarettes, all right? And so, counterfeiting, whether it's cigarettes, money, or other items, what's the involvement of organized crime in Asia in this topic? Grant, you have some thoughts on that?
Well, there's money to be made. There's a lot of money to be made, and also the downside risk is very low. The upside risk is very high. So that's very different than dealing in drugs.
Yeah.
Nobody, if you get caught with counterfeit cigarettes, it's not the same as say a container load of heroin. But it is the significance of the Marlboros is that it is an immense money maker in Asia. For particularly, a lot of this comes out of North Korea and China, and moves all over the world, particularly Europe, Middle East, everywhere, United States, everywhere. And it is an excellent case study of the sort of the multinational, very sophisticated reach of organized crime. And also, this could not exist without the involvement of officials, governments, and law enforcement, and even militaries to protect it. And also very sophisticated banking services that are on offer somewhere.
All tied together.
That's right.
When I think of counterfeiting, the first thing I think of is China. And we see just huge amounts of goods coming out of China that are counterfeit. And actually a lot, since we do have so much production in China of high-end goods, it's not a stretch for people who work in that industry and, for instance, produce
the Louis Vuitton handbag.
Louis Vuitton for Louis Vuitton legitimately in the back door, or coming out the back door. They're producing the same thing on the counterfeit market, and maybe some of the materials are a little bit substandard, or maybe they're not paying the same price, but you see it across the board in all sorts of goods. And as Grant points out, the most likely thing you're going to have happen because of the low prosecutive interest here in this country is it's going to be confiscated. We don't see very many prosecutions for counterfeit goods. On the other hand, North Korea has worked in counterfeiting currency in an attempt, arguably, to destabilize economies, production of counterfeit $100 bills of extremely high quality, because it's state-sponsored, and they are able to obtain the paper and the engraving techniques to make the kind of quality counterfeit bills that cause a real problem.
And because of that expertise in counterfeiting, that is it not one of the reasons why some of our recent Treasury notes that have been issued, folks, you'll notice that the ink is changed and they're a lot more colorful, and that's directly aimed at the North Koreans.
Exactly. Yeah.
What's the connection in let's use China and North Korea as an example between the organized crime gangs, triads, and the government? Are they operating in sync?
Well, to an extent, they couldn't operate without some form of sponsorship or support of the government, whether it's through corruption and corrupting government officials, whatever the case might be. As Grant mentioned, moving products across borders, it's very difficult to do without some involvement of the state.
I read a quote not long ago by a fellow named David Asher, who was the Treasury official who was behind the very successful Macau bank sanctions, which made the North Koreans scream. And he said about North Korea, he says there's no organized crime in North Korea because the government is organized crime.
It's a criminal enterprise in itself.
And that is not a glib statement. That's how it is. And when you get into China, I've had others who know the area very well. They say organized crime and the government are basically
one and the same.
You have to, there's a little more distance in some cases in China than in North Korea, which is a purely criminal enterprise. But in China, you do have just a very deep connection.